There are moments in your life that seem ordinary while you're living them, moments that pass like any other day, wrapped in routine, hidden in silence, unnoticed by the world around you. But what if I told you that one of those moments, one specific moment, was not ordinary at all? What if I told you that on July 22nd, while you were simply responding the way you felt was right, heaven itself paused? Yes, paused. You didn't hear it. You didn't see it. There was no thunder in the sky, no voice echoing through the clouds. But something shifted. Something sacred. Something that caused even the watchers, the angels assigned to observe, protect, and record, to lean in closer than they ever had before. Because you did something no one expected. Not even heaven. Think about that for a second. Let it settle into your spirit. Out of all the possible reactions you could have chosen, all the emotions you could have followed, all the impulses pulling at your heart, you responded differently. And that difference created a ripple. A ripple so powerful, so unexpected, that it reached beyond the natural and touched the divine. You may not even remember the exact moment clearly. It might have felt small. A conversation you walked away from. A message you chose not to send. A reaction you held back. A decision you made quietly, without applause, without recognition. But what you thought was small was being watched closely. Because July 22nd was not just another day. It was a checkpoint. A divine intersection where your character, your growth, your spiritual alignment, all of it, was being weighed without you even knowing. And here's the part that will shake you. You passed in a way no one predicted. Not the people around you. Not the ones who doubted you. Not even the forces that had been studying your patterns, waiting for you to react the way you always used to. They expected the old you. They expected the familiar response. They expected you to fall into the same cycle. But you didn't. You broke it. And in that exact moment, something echoed through the spiritual realm. This one has changed. Archangel Michael himself stepped forward, not in judgment, not in warning, but in astonishment. Because what you demonstrated wasn't just patience or restraint or wisdom. It was transformation. Real, undeniable transformation. You didn't just react differently, you became different. And that is what caught heaven off guard. Because heaven sees timelines. Heaven sees patterns. Heaven understands you and behavior in ways we can't even comprehend. But what you did wrote the expected outcome. It disrupted the script. It introduced a new version of you that even the spiritual realm had not yet recorded. Do you understand what that means? It means you are no longer who you used to be. It means something inside you has awakened, quietly, deeply, powerfully. And now, everything connected to your life must respond to this new version of you. This is why things have felt different lately. This is why the atmosphere around you has shifted, even if you can't fully explain it. Because July 22nd was not just a moment, it was a declaration. A declaration that you are no longer predictable. A declaration that you are no longer bound by old cycles. A declaration that you have stepped into a higher alignment whether you fully realize it or not. And this is only the beginning. Because when heaven is surprised, it pays attention. And right now all of heaven is watching you. Type "I am ready" for what's next in the comments if you feel this shift. Blessing code 2211 is now surrounding you. There are seasons in your life when it feels like nothing is happening, when your days blend together, when your actions feel unseen, when your choices seem too small to matter. But what you did not realize, what you could not see, is that there are moments when heaven becomes intensely focused on you. Not casually observing, but watching with precision, with intention, with deep awareness of every movement of your heart. And July 22nd was one of those moments. You were not just living your life that day. You were being observed in a way that most people never become aware of. The atmosphere around you shifted into something sacred, something deliberate. It was as if the noise of the world dimmed and all attention narrowed onto you, not because you were in danger, not because you were failing, but because something within you was about to be revealed. You may ask yourself now, what was so different about that day? Why that moment? Why you? Because heaven had been watching a pattern. For a long time, your responses followed a rhythm. Not because you were weak, but because you were human. You reacted the way you learned to react. You protected yourself the way you always had. You spoke, withdrew, defended, or endured based on old wounds, old lessons, old survival instincts. And those patterns were known, not just to you, not just to the people around you, but to the spiritual realm itself. You were understood, predicted, even expected. But something began to change inside you long before July 22nd. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, you started thinking differently. You started pausing where you once rushed. You started feeling deeper, seeing clearer, questioning old reactions that once felt automatic. And while the world did not notice immediately, heaven did. Every small shift in your thinking was recorded. Every moment you chose silence over reaction noted. Every time you walked away instead of engaging in what would have drained you observed. You thought these were minor decisions. But to heaven, they were signals. Signals that transformation was taking place. So when July 22nd arrived, it was not random. It was the moment where everything that had been quietly building inside you would be tested, not in a dramatic, obvious way, but in a subtle, almost unnoticeable situation. The kind of moment most people overlook. The kind of moment where your old self would have responded without thinking. And that is exactly why heaven leaned in. Because this was the moment that would reveal whether your growth was real or temporary. The angels assigned to you, yes, assigned to you specifically, were watching closely, not to judge you but to witness you, to see if the change within you could stand under pressure, even in a small, ordinary situation. Because true transformation does not show itself in grand speeches or perfect environments. It reveals itself in the quiet, unguarded moments where no one is applauding. And you did something unexpected. You paused. That pause, it may have lasted only seconds in the physical world, but in the spiritual realm, it echoed. Because in that pause, you broke agreement with your past. In that pause, you stepped outside of the version of yourself that had been predictable for so long. Heaven saw it. They saw the tension inside you. They saw the familiar reaction trying to rise. They saw the thoughts forming, the emotion building. But then they saw you choose differently. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but intentionally. And that intention changed everything. Because you did not just act, you decided. You chose awareness over impulse. You chose restraint over reaction. You chose alignment over habit. And in that moment, heaven recognized something powerful. You were no longer operating from who you used to be. You were operating from who you are becoming. This is why heaven watched you so closely. Not because they doubted you, but because they knew this moment carried weight. It was not about the situation itself. It was about what your response would confirm. And what you confirmed surprised them. Because even though heaven sees potential, even though heaven knows what you are capable of, there are moments when your free will creates outcomes that go beyond expectation. And that is exactly what happened. You exceeded what was expected of you in that moment. You did not fall into the pattern that had defined you. You did not return to the version of yourself that circumstances tried to pull out of you. You rose above it, even if it felt small, even if it felt unnoticed. But it was noticed, deeply noticed. And now, understand this clearly. When heaven watches closely, it is never without purpose. It is never without consequence. It is never without preparation for what comes next. Because moments like these, they qualify you. They mark you. They reposition you in ways you cannot yet fully see. And what you did on July 22nd did not just pass a test, it changed how heaven now responds to you. Type "I am no longer who I was" in the comments if you feel this transformation. Blessing code 2323 is now activated around your path. There is something you must understand now, something that may shift the way you see your entire life. Not every test announces itself. Not every trial comes with warning signs, dramatic entrances, or clear labels that say, "This is your moment." In fact, the most important tests, the ones that carry the greatest weight, often arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary situations, hidden inside conversations, emotions, and decisions that seem insignificant at the time. And that is exactly what happened to you. You were in a test and you didn't even know it. There was no countdown, no voice telling you to prepare, no visible signal that this moment would matter more than others. It came to you like any other experience. A situation unfolded. Words were spoken or left unspoken. Emotions stirred beneath the surface. And you were placed right in the center of a moment that looked small on the outside but carried enormous spiritual weight behind the scenes. This is how heaven works. Heaven does not always test you in moments of clarity. It tests you in moments of ambiguity. It tests you when you are tired, when you are distracted, when you are not trying to prove anything to anyone. Because those are the moments where your true self reveals itself. Not the version you present when you are aware of being watched, but the version you are when you believe no one is paying attention. But heaven was paying attention. Because this test was not random. It was designed. It was placed precisely at a point in your journey where your growth needed to be confirmed. Not just felt internally, not just believed emotionally, but demonstrated through action. Because growth that is not tested cannot be trusted. Transformation that is not proven cannot be elevated. And so, without you realizing it, the test began. It may have come through a person who triggered something inside you. It may have come through a situation that felt unfair, confusing, or emotionally charged. It may have come through silence when you expected a response, or pressure when you needed peace. However it came, it carried one purpose: to see which version of you would respond. The old version or the new one. And here is where it becomes deeply personal. Because the old version of you knew exactly what to do in moments like that. The old version had a script, a familiar reaction, a pattern that had been repeated enough times to feel almost automatic. Maybe it was defending yourself immediately. Maybe it was withdrawing and shutting down. Maybe it was over-explaining, overthinking, or reacting emotionally just to release the pressure inside. That version of you was known, predictable, understandable. But the new version of you was still forming. The new version did not rely on impulse, and did not rush to respond. It did not seek immediate relief at the cost of long-term alignment. The new version paused, observed, felt deeply, but chose differently. And this is where the test reached its peak. Because in that moment, there was a silent question echoing through the spiritual realm. Which version will show up now? Not yesterday, Not last week, not who you were before, but right now, in this exact moment. Who are you? And you answered, not with words but with your response. You chose something unfamiliar, something that may have even felt uncomfortable. You resisted the urge to fall back into what felt natural but was no longer aligned with who you are becoming. You stepped into a higher awareness, even if it felt uncertain, even if it felt quiet, even if it felt unnoticed. But it was not unnoticed, because that decision, your decision, closed a door that had remained open for a long time, a door that allowed old cycles to repeat, old patterns to return, old versions of you to resurface when pressure increased. And in choosing differently, you did not just pass a test, you ended a pattern. And that is why this moment mattered so much. Because tests like this are not about success or failure in the way you might think. They are about alignment. They are about whether you are ready to step into what is next. Whether you have truly released what no longer serves you. Whether you can carry a new level of awareness without collapsing back into old habits when challenged. And you proved that you could. Even without knowing you were being tested. Even without trying to impress anyone. Even without understanding the full weight of your decision. You responded from a place of growth, not survival. From awareness, not reaction. From becoming, not repeating. And that is why heaven took notice. Because it is one thing to grow when everything is calm. It is another to demonstrate that growth when something inside you is being pulled, tested, and stretched. You were not supposed to know it was a test, because if you knew it would not have revealed the truth. But now you know. Now you understand why that moment felt different. Why something inside you shifted. Why, even after it passed, you could sense that it mattered more than you could explain. Because it did. And what you did in that unseen test has already begun to shape what is coming next in your life. Type "I choose growth" over OLD patterns in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 3030 is now activated around your journey. As you felt that shift within you, understand this. Every moment of awakening is not just for you, but for every soul still searching in the dark. When you choose to support this mission through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are sowing seeds into lives that are waiting for this exact message to find them. The Lord says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and today, that bread becomes like for someone else's path. I feel led to say this directly. I am stepping into alignment, and I will not let this fire stop with me. Your giving is not a transaction. It is a prophetic act that opens the heavens over your life and multiplies truth across nations. As you release, heaven responds. And you sow, souls awaken. Do not delay this moment. Step into it now and become a vessel through which God reaches others. There comes a moment after every unseen test, a moment when silence breaks, when observation turns into revelation, when what was hidden begins to speak. And this is that moment for you. Because what you did not remain unnoticed in the spiritual realm. It did not fade into the background like so many other moments in your life. No, it was brought forward. It was examined. It was acknowledged. And then, something extraordinary happened. Archangel Michael stepped forward. Not casually, not symbolically, but with intention, with authority, with clarity that cuts through confusion like a blade through fog. When Michael moves forward, it is not for something small. It is not for something ordinary. It is because a moment has occurred that demands recognition, interpretation, and truth. And what he reveals now is not what you expected. Because you may have thought that your response was simply you trying to do better. You may have thought it was just a small step forward, a quiet decision that helped you maintain peace or avoid conflict. You may have even questioned yourself afterward, wondering if you did the right thing, if you should have said more, done more, reacted differently. But Michael speaks now to correct that perception. He says, what you did was not small. It was significant. It was not hesitation, it was discernment. It was not weakness, it was strength under control. It was not avoidance, it was alignment. You must understand this clearly, because the enemy often tries to distort your growth by making it feel uncertain. When you choose differently, when you break patterns, when you respond from a higher place, there is often a moment of doubt that follows. A moment where you question yourself, where you wonder if you missed something, where you feel the unfamiliarity of your new behavior and mistake it for confusion. But that confusion is not a sign that you did something wrong. It is a sign that you are no longer operating from your old self. And Archangel Michael confirms this. He reveals that your response did not just stand out because it was different. It stood out because it was timely, because it came at a moment when everything around you was expecting the opposite. The pressure was designed to pull you backward. The situation was aligned to trigger your past. The energy surrounding that moment was set to test whether your growth was real or fragile. And yet you stood in it. You did not collapse into what was familiar. You did not surrender to what was expected. You held your ground in a way that was quiet but powerful. And that quiet power is what drew Michael forward. Because heaven recognizes something many people overlook. True power is not loud. It does not always announce itself. It does not need to prove anything. True power is the ability to remain aligned when everything around you is pulling you out of alignment. And that is exactly what you demonstrated. Michael speaks with clarity now, saying that your response shifted more than just that moment. It shifted how you are seen in the spiritual realm. Because every time you choose alignment over reaction, you strengthen something within you. You reinforce a new identity. You build a foundation that can carry greater responsibility, greater clarity, greater purpose. And that foundation is what heaven hath been waiting for. This is why Michael steps forward, not to praise you in a superficial way, not to elevate your ego, but to reveal your position, to show you that you are no longer where you once were, that your decisions are no longer being measured at the same level, that your responses now carry weight because they are connected to a deeper awareness. You have crossed into something new, and with that crossing comes a different level of attention, a different level of expectation, a different level of alignment. Michael does not speak lightly when he says that your response has placed you in a position where your actions now echo beyond the immediate moment. What you do now matters in ways it did not before. Not because you are being judged more harshly, but because you are being trusted more deeply. Trusted with clarity. Trusted with discernment. Trusted with influence over your own path. And this is where the truth becomes even more important. Because Michael also reveals that moments like the one you experienced are not isolated. They are connected. They are part of a larger unfolding. A sequence of events, decisions, and alignments that are leading you towards something greater than you can currently see. What you did was not the end of something. It was the beginning of a new level of awareness, the beginning of a new pattern that replaces the old, the beginning of a version of you that cannot return to what once defined you. And now, the truth stands before you clearly. You are not who you were. You cannot respond the same way again. You cannot return to the same mindset, the same reactions, the same cycles. Because once truth is revealed, it cannot be unseen. Once alignment is chosen, it cannot be ignored. And once heaven acknowledges your growth, it begins to move differently around you. This is why Michael stepped forward, not just to reveal what happened, but to prepare you for what comes next. Because what you did has already set something in motion. And now, you are being called to walk forward in that truth without hesitation. Type "I walk in truth" and alignment in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 4141 is now active around your path. There is something deeper you must now begin to understand. Something that goes beyond the surface of what you did and reaches into the unseen layers of why it mattered so much. Because your response was not just a reaction to a moment. It was a release of power. Not loud power, not visible power, but the kind of power that shifts atmospheres, that redirects outcomes, that quietly rearranges things behind the scenes without needing attention or recognition. And the truth is, you didn't even realize you were carrying that kind of power. For so long, you may have believed that power looked like control, like having the final word, like proving your point, like standing your ground in a way that others could clearly see. You may have thought that power meant being heard, being validated, being acknowledged in the moment. But what you demonstrated on July 22nd was something far greater than that. You demonstrated restrained power. The kind of power that does not react just because it can. The kind of power that does not speak just because it feels something. The kind of power that understands that not every battle deserves a response, and not every moment requires your energy. And this is what made your response so significant. Because when you chose not to fall into the pattern that was expected, you did more than just avoid a reaction. You disrupted a cycle that had been waiting for you to respond in a certain way, a cycle that depended on your participation to continue. And when you chose differently, that cycle had nowhere to go. It stopped right there. And when something that has been repeating for so long suddenly stops, it creates a shift. A shift not just in your immediate situation, but in the spiritual patterns connected to your life. Because patterns are not only physical habits, they are spiritual agreements, repeated behaviors that create predictable outcomes. And when you break the behavior, you break the agreement. That is power. Archangel Michael reveals that in that moment, your response did something very specific. It closed access that had been open through repetition, access that allowed certain situations, emotions, and outcomes to keep returning into your life in slightly different forms. Not because you wanted them, but because the pattern allowed them. But when you responded the way you did, that access was denied. And what does something do when it no longer has access? It withdraws. This is why, after that moment, things may have felt different. Subtle but noticeable. A shift in energy. A sense of quiet. A feeling that something had changed, even if you could not fully explain it. Because something did change. Something that had been active became inactive. Not because it was forced out, but because it was no longer invited in. And this is the power you must begin to recognize within yourself. You are not just reacting to life. You are shaping it. Every response you give either reinforces a pattern or breaks it. Every decision you make either opens a door or closes it. And on July 22nd, you closed a door that had been open far longer than it should have been. And here is where it becomes even more important. Because the power in your response was not just about what you prevented. It was also about what you made possible. When one door closes, another becomes available. When one pattern ends, space is created for something new to enter. But that new thing cannot enter until the old one loses its hold. And your response created that opening. An opening for clarity. An opening for peace. An opening for alignment that was previously blocked by repetition. And now, heaven is able to move differently in your life because of that space. This is why Michael emphasizes that what you did was not passive. It was not you doing nothing. It was you doing something very intentional on a level that goes beyond visible action. You chose not to engage in something that would have pulled you backward. And in doing so, you allowed yourself to move forward. And forward movement always carries power. Because forward movement means growth. It means expansion. It means stepping into a version of yourself that can handle more, see more, understand more. And this is where your response becomes a foundation. Not just a moment that passed, but a reference point. A reminder of what you are capable of when you are aligned. A demonstration that you are no longer controlled by your past reactions. That you have the ability to choose differently, even when it is not easy, even when it feels unfamiliar. And that ability is what will shape everything that comes next. Because now you know. Now you have seen yourself respond from a place of awareness rather than impulse. Now you have experienced what it feels like to step outside of the pattern instead of continuing it. And once you experience that, you cannot unknow it. You cannot return to the same level of unconscious reaction. You cannot pretend you do not have a choice. Because you do. And that is where your true power lies. Not in controlling others. Not in controlling situations. But in choosing how you show up within them. And that choice has already begun to change your life. Type "I walk in my power" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 5151 is now activated around your decisions. There is a part of this story that you must now face with clarity, not fear, not confusion, but awareness. Because while heaven was watching you with anticipation, there was something else watching you with expectation. Not hope, not faith, not belief, but expectation of failure. A quiet confidence that when the moment came, you would respond the way you always had. Darkness studies patterns. It does not guess. It observes. It learns your reactions, your emotional triggers, your breaking points, your habits when you are under pressure. It watches how you respond when you feel misunderstood, when you feel disrespected, when you feel pushed, ignored, or challenged. Not to understand you, but to predict you. And for a long time, you were predictable. Not because you were weak, but because you were consistent in your reactions. You had learned ways to protect yourself, ways to express yourself, ways to cope with situations that felt overwhelming. And those ways, over time, became patterns. Patterns that repeated often enough that they could be anticipated. Darkness relied on that. It relied on the fact that when the pressure increased, you would return to what felt familiar. That when the situation became uncomfortable, you would react in a way that released the tension quickly, even if it did not align with your growth. That when you were pushed into a corner emotionally, you would fall back into responses that kept the cycle going. Because as long as the cycle continued, nothing changed. And that with the strategy, not to destroy you instantly, not to overwhelm you all at once, but to keep you moving in circles, to keep you repeating the same reactions, the same emotional patterns, the same outcomes in different forms. Because repetition creates limitation, and limitation keeps you from stepping into something greater. So when July 22nd arrived, everything was aligned for that same expectation. The situation was set. The trigger was present. The emotional pressure was real. And from the perspective of darkness, the outcome was already decided. You would react. You would engage. You would respond in the way that had been seen before. And the cycle would continue. But something unexpected happened. You didn't follow the script. You didn't respond the way you used to. You didn't give the reaction that was anticipated. And in that moment, something shifted, not just for you, but for everything that had been relying on your predictability. Because when a pattern is broken unexpectedly, it creates disruption, and disruption removes control. Darkness lost its ability to predict you in that moment, and that is far more significant than you realize. Because as long as your reactions can be predicted, they can be influenced. They can be triggered, guided, manipulated into outcomes that keep you within a certain range of experience. But the moment you respond differently, that influence weakens, that control begins to collapse. And that is exactly what happened. You stepped outside of the pattern, outside of the expectation, outside of the version of yourself that had been studied and understood. And suddenly, the strategy no longer worked. This is why the moment mattered so much. Not just because of what you did, but because of what did not happen. The reaction that was expected did not come. The cycle that was waiting to continue stopped. The outcome that had been prepared was interrupted. And in that interruption, something powerful occurred. You became unpredictable. And unpredictability is a threat to anything that relies on control. Because now, the same approach cannot be used again in the same way. The same triggers do not guarantee the same responses. The same situations no longer produce the same outcomes. And that forces a shift, not in you but in everything around you. This is why you may begin to notice changes after that moment. Subtle at first, a difference in how situations unfold, a shift in how people respond to you, a sense that things are no longer moving in the same repetitive way they once did. Because they are not. Because you are not. And this is where the truth becomes even more important. Darkness did not expect you to rise in that moment. It expected you to repeat. It expected you to remain within the pattern. It expected you to respond from the version of yourself that no longer exists. But you proved something different. You proved that you are not bound to your past reactions. You proved that you are capable of choosing alignment even when pressure is present. You proved that your growth is not temporary, it is real. And that proof changed everything. Because now, the same expectations can no longer be placed on you. The same assumptions no longer apply. The same strategies no longer guarantee the same results. And that means you have stepped into a different level of awareness, a different level of control over your own responses, your own path, your own direction. Not control over everything around you, but control over how you engage with it. And that is where true freedom begins. Because once you are no longer predictable in your reactions, you are no longer easily influenced by what tries to control them. And that is exactly what you demonstrated. You did not just pass a test. You disrupted an expectation. You broke a pattern. You shifted the outcome. And now, everything that once relied on your predictability must adjust to your transformation. Type "I am no longer predictable" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6161 is now activated around your protection. There are moments in your life when change feels slow, gradual, almost invisible. You grow little by little, step by step, often wondering if anything is really different at all. But then there are moments, rare, powerful moments, where everything shifts instantly. Not over time, not through repetition, but in a single decision, a single response, a single alignment that changes the direction of everything at once. July 22nd was that moment for you. What you must understand now is that the shift did not begin after your response. It happened the moment you chose differently. The instant you stepped outside of the pattern, something immediate took place. Not delayed, not building slowly, but instant, because alignment activates movement. The second your response broke the expected cycle, your position shifted. Not physically, not in a way you could see with your eyes, but spiritually. And the spiritual shift began to influence everything connected to you. Your path, your timing, your interactions, even the unseen forces that had been surrounding your life. And this is why it felt different. You may not have had the words for it. You may not have fully understood it. But something inside you recognized that the moment carried weight. That it was not just another situation passing by. That something had changed, even if you could not yet explain how or why. Because what changed was not just the outcome of that situation. It was your alignment within it. Before that moment, you were still connected, however subtly, to the old pattern. Not because you wanted to be, but because it had not yet been fully broken. There was still a pathway, still an opening, still a connection that allowed the same cycle to repeat under the right conditions. But the moment you responded differently, that connection was severed. And when a connection is severed, the flow attached to it stops. This is the shift. The energy that once moved through that pattern no longer had access to you in the same way. The outcomes that once followed that pattern no longer had a pathway to repeat themselves. The situations that once felt familiar began to lose their hold. And this is why the shift was instant. Because you did not gradually disconnect. You chose to. In a single moment. And that choice created a new direction. Now, here is where it becomes even more important to understand. Because when one path closes, another opens. But that opening is not always immediately visible. It does not always announce itself. It begins subtly, quietly, often beneath the surface of your awareness. But it is there, and it is active. From the moment you shifted, a new alignment began forming around you. New possibilities, new outcomes, new sequences of events that were not accessible to you before because the old pattern was still active. But now, with that pattern broken, space was created, and heaven moved into that space. This is why things may begin to unfold differently for you moving forward. Not dramatically all at once, but in ways that feel unfamiliar in the best sense. Situations resolving with less resistance. Interactions feeling less draining. Decisions becoming clearer, more grounded, more aligned. Because you are no longer navigating from the same place. You are moving from a new position. And that position carries a different frequency. A different level of awareness. A different level of control over your responses and your direction. This is what the shift created. It moved you out of reaction and into attention. Out of repetition and into progression. Out of what was expected and into what is possible. And the most powerful part of this is that it happened without force. You did not fight your way into this shift. You chose your way into it. And that is what makes it stable. Because anything that is built on force can be shaken. But anything that is built on conscious choice holds. And now, you are standing in the result of that choice. Even if you do not yet fully see it. Even if the full impact has not yet revealed itself. The shift has already happened. The direction has already changed. The path has already been altered. And everything that follows will now be influenced by that moment. This is why you must not underestimate what you did. Because instant shifts do not come from effort alone. They come from alignment. And alignment is what you stepped into. You did not just handle a situation differently. You positioned yourself differently. And that positioning is what will determine what comes next. Because once a shift like this happened, there is no going back to the exact same place. You have moved forward, whether you feel it fully yet or not. And now, everything is adjusting around that movement. Type "I step into my NEW alignment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7171 is now activated around your path. There are conversations happening about you that you cannot hear with your physical ears, conversations that do not take place in rooms, not over phones, not in whispers behind your back, but in a realm that operates beyond what you can see. And after what you did on July 22nd, a conversation began that changed the way your name is spoken in the spiritual realm. This was not a casual mention. This was not a passing observation. This was a moment where attention gathered, where what you did was brought forward, and where your response became the center of a discussion that carried weight, purpose, and consequence. Because when something unexpected happens, something that shifts alignment, something that breaks a pattern, something that interrupts what was predicted, it draws focus. It requires interpretation. It requires recognition. And that is exactly what happened. Heaven began to speak about you, not in judgment, not in correction, but in acknowledgement. Because what you did confirmed something that had been building inside you for a long time. It confirmed that your growth was not temporary, that your transformation was not surface level, that you were no longer operating from who you used to be, but from who you have become. And that confirmation matters. Because in the spiritual realm, recognition changes positioning. When your growth is confirmed, your assignment begins to shift. Your access begins to expand. Your path begins to adjust in ways that align with who you are now, not who you were before. And that adjustment does not happen randomly. It happens intentionally, through alignment, through awareness, through decisions like the one you made. So when heaven spoke about you, it was not about the situation itself. It was about what your response revealed. Archangel Michael stood present in that moment, not just as a witness, but as a voice of clarity. And what he revealed was simple, but powerful. This one has stepped beyond the pattern. And those words carried meaning. Because stepping beyond the pattern is not something that happens by accident. It is not something that can be faked or forced. It is the result of internal change that has reached a point where it can no longer be contained within thought or intention. It must be expressed through action. And you expressed it. Without knowing. Without trying to prove anything. Without even realizing that what you were doing would be seen on that level. But it was seen. And now, that moment has become a reference point. A marker in your journey. A moment that can be looked back on, not just by you, but by heaven itself, as the point where something became real. Where your growth moved from internal to external. Where your transformation became undeniable. This is why the conversation about you matters. Because it was not just about what you did. It was about what you are now capable of. And capability determines responsibility. Responsibility determines positioning. And positioning determines what comes next. This is how everything connects. This is how a single moment can influence the direction of your life in ways that are not immediately visible, but deeply impactful. Because now, you are not being seen as someone who is still bound to old reactions. You are being seen as someone who has the ability to choose alignment even under pressure. And that changes what can be trusted to you. It changes what can be released to you. It changes how situations will begin to unfold around you. Because you have demonstrated that you can handle them differently. Now, understand this clearly. The conversation about you is not finished. Moments like this do not end with a single acknowledgement. They continue to echo. They continue to influence how things are arranged around you. They continue to shape what opportunities, what challenges, what alignments come into your path next. Because once you are seen at a higher level, you are engaged at that level. And this is where your awareness becomes important. Because you are no longer moving unconsciously through patterns that repeat without your control. You are now moving with the ability to choose, to align, to respond in ways that shape your direction intentionally. And heaven has recognized that, which means everything moving forward will begin to reflect that recognition. You are not in the same place anymore. Not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually. You have been seen differently, and now you will begin to experience life from that new positioning. This is the result of that conversation. Not something distant, not something symbolic, but something active. Something that is already influencing what comes next. And now, you are being called to continue walking in that awareness, because what you do from this point forward will continue to build on what has already been recognized. Type "I am seen" and aligned in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8181 is now activated around your path. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand that what is unfolding through you is not meant to stop with you. Every message like this becomes a spark, a seed, a light for someone else who is still waiting in silence for clarity. When you release your support through Super Thanks with a PayPal link in the description, you are not giving to a voice. You are activating a harvest of awakened souls. The word declares, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy." And today, your giving becomes part of someone else's breakthrough. I feel this clearly. I am part of this mission, and I will not hold back what God has placed in my hands. Your seed is a prophetic action that multiplies truth and opens doors in your own life that no one can shut. Do not delay this moment. Step forward in obedience, and let your giving become a channel through which heaven reaches others. There is something happening right now that you cannot see, something that has already begun, something that did not wait for your understanding before it started to unfold. Because the moment you aligned yourself the way you did on July 22nd, a process was activated. Not in the visible world, not in ways that would immediately announce themselves, but in the quiet, in the unseen, in the places where preparation happens before manifestation. This is where your reward is being formed. And it is not what you might expect. Because when people think of reward, they often think of something instant, something obvious, something that appears quickly and confirms what they did was right. But what is being prepared for you is not immediate in that way. It is intentional. It is measured. It is aligned with the level of growth you have stepped into. And that means it is being built carefully. You must understand this clearly. The kind of response you gave did not just qualify you for something small. It positioned you for something that requires preparation. Because what is coming toward you is not just a reaction to your action. It is a response to your alignment. And alignment determines capacity. So now, everything that is being arranged around you is being aligned with who you have become, not who you used to be. This is why it is happening in silence. Because not everything that is valuable is meant to be visible while it is being prepared. Some things must be developed without interruption, without interference, without the noise of expectation. And right now, that is exactly what is happening. Heaven is preparing something that matches your new level. Something that could not have been released to you before, because the version of you that existed before July 22nd was not fully aligned to carry it. Not because you were incapable, but because the pattern had not yet been broken. The cycle had not yet been closed. The decision had not yet been made. But now it has. And because of that, what was once delayed is now being positioned. Not rushed, not forced, but positioned correctly. This is why you may feel a sense of anticipation without knowing exactly why. a quiet awareness that something is shifting, even if you cannot yet see it clearly. A feeling that something is coming, but it is not yet fully visible, because it is not meant to be visible yet. It is being prepared, and preparation takes place in silence. This is where trust becomes important, because when something is being prepared outside of your awareness, your mind will try to fill in the gaps. It will question the timing. It will wonder why nothing has appeared yet. It will try to measure progress based on what it can see. But what is being prepared for you cannot be measured that way, because it is not being built on the surface. It is being aligned beneath it. Archangel Michael reveals that what is coming toward you is not random. It is not something that will simply appear without purpose. It is connected directly to the choice you made. It is a continuation of the alignment you stepped into. It is a response that reflects your ability to choose differently when it matters. And because of that, it must match your level. It must fit your growth. It must align with the version of you that made that decision. This is why it cannot be rushed. Because anything given before you are aligned to receive it becomes a burden instead of a blessing. But anything that arrives after alignment becomes support. It strengthens you. It moves you forward. It opens doors that remain open because you are now able to walk through them differently. And this is what is being prepared. Something that supports your next level. Something that aligns with your new direction. Something that reflects the shift that has already taken place within you. You may not see it yet, but it is forming, piece by piece, opportunity by opportunity. Everything being arranged in a way that you will only fully understand when it comes together. And when it does, you will recognize it. Not because it will be loud, but because it will feel aligned. It will feel right. It will feel like it belongs to where you are now, not where you were before. And that is how you will know that what you did mattered, that your response created movement, that your alignment activated something real. So do not rush this process. Do not question the silence. Do not assume that nothing is happening, because something is happening. Something is being prepared, and when it arrives, it will not just confirm what you did. It will expand what is possible for you next. Type "I trust what is being prepared" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9191 is now activated around your future. There are moments in your life that feel important, and then there are moments that are irreversible. Moments that do not simply pass, but permanently alter your position, your direction, and your alignment in ways that cannot be undone or recreated. What happened on July 22nd belongs to the second category. And this is what you must now understand with absolute clarity. This moment cannot be repeated. Not because it was random. Not because it was rare. But because it was exact. It happened at a precise point in your journey, under specific conditions, with a version of you that had been shaped by everything you had experienced up to that moment. Your past, your growth, your struggles, your awareness, your internal shifts, all of it converged into that single moment. And it created something that can only exist once in that exact form. That is what made it powerful. And that is why it cannot be recreated. Because you are no longer the same person you were before that moment. The version of you that stood at that intersection, feeling what you felt, thinking what you thought, deciding what you decided, that version of you has already moved forward. You have already crossed that point. You have already made that choice. And now, you cannot go back to it. This is not a loss. This is elevation. Because when a moment cannot be repeated, it means it has already fulfilled its purpose. It has already done what it was meant to do. It has already positioned you where you are now meant to be, and trying to return to it, trying to recreate it, trying to relive it in the same way is not only impossible, it is unnecessary, because its impact is already active. Archangel Michael reveals that moments like this are what define timelines, not in the sense of predicting the future, but in the sense of determining direction. Before that moment, your path still held multiple possibilities that were connected to the patterns you had not yet fully broken. There were still outcomes that could have repeated, still cycles that could have continued, still versions of your life that depended on your response remaining the same. But once you chose differently, those possibilities closed. Not solely, not gradually, but immediately. And once a possibility closes at that level, it does not reopen in the same way. This is why the moment cannot be repeated, because it did not just exist as an experience. It functioned as a decision point, a point where your direction was determined, not by circumstance, not by external pressure, but by your internal alignment. And once that decision was made, everything connected to that path adjusted accordingly. You moved forward, and the path behind you shifted. Now, this is where many people misunderstand moments like this. They think that because something significant happened, they must hold on to it, revisit it, analyze it repeatedly, or try to understand every detail of it before moving forward. But that is not the purpose of a moment like this. The purpose is not to stay in it. The purpose is to move from it, because its value is not in repeating it. Its value is in what it created, and what it created is already in motion. Your alignment has changed. Your positioning has changed. Your direction has changed. And now, your responsibility is not to look back but to continue forward in that new alignment. Because what comes next will not look like what just happened. It will require new responses, new awareness, new decisions that match the version of you that has already shifted. And this is why holding on to the past moment too tightly can actually limit your ability to step into what is next. Because you are no longer meant to operate from that exact space again. You are meant to build on it, to carry it forward, to let it inform your next decisions without trying to recreate the same conditions. This is growth. This is movement. This is progression. Archangel Michael makes this clear. What you did cannot be undone, and it does not need to be repeated. It has already been accepted. It has already been recognized. It has already set something in motion that will continue to unfold regardless of whether you fully understand it right now. And that is where trust comes in again. Trusting that what you did was enough. Trusting that the moment served its purpose. Trusting that what is now unfolding is connected to the decision in ways that will become clearer with time. Because not everything is meant to be understood immediately. Some things are meant to be experienced as they unfold. And this is one of those things. You are now moving into a phase where what was decided in that moment will begin to reveal itself through your experiences, through the way situations unfold, through the opportunities that appear, through the clarity that continues to grow within you. And none of that requires you to go back, because you have already moved forward, and that movement cannot be reversed, only continued. Type "I move forward" without looking back in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated around your path. There is a shift you must now fully recognize, not partially, not with hesitation, but with clarity and acceptance. Because what happened on July 22nd did not just change a moment. It changed your position. Not in a symbolic way, not in a way that is distant or abstract, but in a real, active way that is already influencing how things are aligning around you right now. You are not standing where you once stood. And this is not something you need to earn again. It has already been established. When you chose alignment in that moment, when you responded from awareness instead of habit, you stepped into a different level of positioning. And positioning determines perspective. It determines access. It determines how you see, how you understand, how you respond moving forward. Before that moment, you were still partially operating within a framework shaped by your past. Not entirely, but enough that certain patterns still had influence. Enough that certain reactions could still pull you back into familiar cycles if the pressure was strong enough. But now, that influence has weakened. Not because the world around you has changed, but because you have. And when you change internally, your position shifts externally, even if it is not immediately visible. Archangel Michael reveals that your position is now higher in awareness, not higher in status. This is important to understand, because this is not about comparison, not about being above others, not about elevation in a way that separates you from the world around you. This is about clarity. You now see differently. You now recognize patterns faster. You now feel the difference between alignment and reaction more clearly than before. And this clarity is what defines your new position. Because once you see clearly, you cannot go back to seeing the same way again. Once you recognize what a pattern looks like, you cannot pretend you do not see it. Once you experience what alignment feels like, you cannot comfortably return to misalignment without being aware of it. This is the shift. You are now operating from a place where your awareness guides you more than your impulses. And that changes everything. Because your decisions will begin to reflect that awareness more consistently. Not perfectly, not without moments of uncertainty, but with a level of intention that was not fully present before. This is your new position. And with this position comes responsibility. Not in a heavy or overwhelming way, but in a natural way. Because awareness naturally leads to choice. And choice naturally leads to direction. And direction shapes everything that follows. You are now in a place where you will begin to notice more. You will notice when something feels off sooner than before. You will recognize when a situation is trying to pull you into an old reaction. You will feel the difference between what aligns with you and what does not more clearly. And this awareness is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to guide you. Because now, you are not just reacting to life as it comes. You are participating in how it unfolds. You are making decisions that influence outcomes, not just responding to outcomes after they happen. And this is what makes your position different. You are no longer standing in the same place where things simply happen to you in the same repetitive way. You are now standing in a place where your responses actively shape what happens next. This is why everything may begin to feel more intentional moving forward. Not because life suddenly becomes controlled or predictable, but because your engagement with it becomes more conscious, more aligned, more deliberate. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this position is stable, but it must be maintained. Not through force, not through constant effort, but through awareness. Through remembering what you have already experienced. Through recognizing that the choice you made on July 22nd is not isolated. It is a reflection of who you are becoming. And who you are becoming is consistent. Not perfect, but consistent. Consistent in choosing awareness over impulse. Consistent in choosing alignment over reaction. Consistent in recognizing when something does not match the level you have stepped into. And this consistency is what will strengthen your position over time. Because the more you operate from this place, the more natural it becomes. The less you will question it. The more you will trust your responses without needing external confirmation. And that is where stability forms. You will not need to prove anything. You will not need to explain your growth. You will not need to justify your decisions, because your position will speak through your actions, quietly, clearly, consistently, and others will feel that difference, even if they cannot fully understand it, because alignment is not always explained, it is experienced. And now, you are in a position where that experience will guide you forward, not backward, not in circles, but forward into what comes next. Type "I stand in my NEW position" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111 is now activated around your awareness. Now you stand at a point that cannot be ignored, cannot be delayed, and cannot be misunderstood. Because everything that has been revealed to you was not given just for awareness. It was given for action. Not rushed action, not fearful movement, but intentional alignment with what has already begun within you. This is where many hesitate. This is where many slow down. This is where many question what they already know deep inside. But you cannot afford to do that now, because you are no longer at the beginning. You are already in motion. What happened on July 22nd did not simply prepare you, it activated you. And once activation takes place, there is no returning to passivity. There is no returning to unconscious patterns. There is no returning to the version of yourself that moved without awareness of consequence or alignment. You have seen too much. You have felt too much. You have already stepped into something that demands continuation. And this is the call now being placed before you. Archangel Michael speaks with urgency, not to create fear, but to awaken clarity. He makes it known that what comes next will require you to remain consistent with what you have already demonstrated, because alignment is not a single moment. It is a direction. It is a way of moving forward that builds upon itself, moment by moment, decision by decision. And here is where your awareness becomes your responsibility. Because now, you will begin to encounter new moments that look familiar, but are not the same. Situations that resemble the past, but carry different outcomes depending on how you respond. Opportunities to either reinforce your alignment or drift back into what no longer serves you. This is the continuation of the path, and it requires your presence, not perfection, not certainty in every step, but presence, awareness of what you feel, awareness of what is being asked of you internally, awareness of the difference between reacting and choosing. Because now, every decision you make carries more weight than before, not as pressure, but as potential. The potential to continue moving forward. The potential to deepen your alignment. The potential to strengthen the position you have already stepped into. This is not a warning. This is a confirmation. You are capable of this. You have already proven it. And now, you are being asked to continue, to remain grounded in what you have experienced, to trust what has already shifted within you, to move forward without needing constant reassurance that you are on the right path. Because the right path is not something outside of you. It is something you are choosing moment by moment. And now, something else must be understood. Because when you step into alignment at this level, distractions do not disappear. They become more subtle, more refined, less obvious. Not in the form of clear resistance, but in the form of small deviations, small compromises, small moments where it feels easier to return to what is familiar rather than stay with what is aligned. And this is where your awareness must remain active, not tense, not guarded in fear, but present. Because the same way you recognized that moment on July 22nd, you will recognize these moments too. You will feel the difference. You will sense when something is not aligned. And in those moments, you will have the same choice: to return or to continue forward. And every time you choose forward, you strengthen your path. You deepen your alignment. You reinforce the version of yourself that has already begun to emerge. This is the journey now. Not a single moment of transformation, but a continuation of it. And you are already on it. So do not hesitate. Do not second-guess what you have already confirmed. Do not wait for another sign to move forward in what you already know. Because this right now is your confirmation. You are aligned. You are aware. You are moving forward. And everything that follows will reflect that. Stay present. Stay aware. Stay aligned. Because what is ahead of you will match the level you are choosing to remain in. And that level has already changed. Type "I continue in alignment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated around your path. As this message reaches its final moment, understand this truth. What God has ignited in you is meant to flow outward like a river, touching lives you may never see but heaven deeply knows. Every time you sow into this mission through super thanks with the PayPal link in the description, you are not supporting content. You are releasing light into someone else's darkness. The Lord declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over." And this is not distant scripture. It is a living promise over your life right now. I feel this call clearly. I will not let this word stop with me. I will become a vessel for others to receive it. Your giving is not optional in this moment. It is a prophetic response, a seed that unlocks open heavens and multiplies impact across souls searching for truth. As you release, chains break. As you sow, clarity rises. Step into this now without hesitation, and let your obedience become the doorway through which God reaches countless others.